Thank you. And the energy is well deserved because I've had the chance to chat with these folks earlier, and we are in for a treat today. So I'm Marianne Schroer. I'm the Director of Marketing at Parity, where we work with brands to help incorporate women's sports and women athletes into their marketing mix. So authenticity and connection is a big part of that. So we're thrilled to be hosting this conversation. I'll start us off with a really quick intro so that we can get into the meaty stuff. But first up, we have Anna here, who is the Senior Director of Brand Strategy at Walmart. She owns cultural strategy, including the very talked about Gen Z, and previously has worked at agencies with clients including Chewy.com, Under Armour, IBM. Next up, we have Cynthia, founder of LATINA podcast, previously a marketing leader at Moneyline, Walmart, Guild, BCG, and Nestle. Javier, who is a professor at Syracuse and the founder of J. Wolf Advisors, where he does consulting with clients including the NFL, and has held roles in marketing, culture, and entertainment at brands like Verizon, Pepsi, Microsoft, Paramount. List goes on for a while there, so I'll cut us off. And last but certainly not least, we have Stacie, who is the SVP of Inclusive Insights and Intelligence at Nielsen. There she drives innovation in how we think about diverse communities and is a thought leader in the U.S. Hispanic markets. So to get us started, I'd love to level set. We have this great title of Cultural Connection, Unlocking Authentic Engagement, which all great words, but what do they really mean? So could each of you take the time to define what authentic engagement means to you, particularly in this context of cultural connection? Anna, we'll start with you.
Okay. Well, I think one of the things about brand building and cultural engagement and cultural connections is really having a good think and being truthful to yourself about the value of your brand and business to the customer. Oftentimes, we want to say something to the customer, but that's not really our true value. And I'll give an example. Sometimes when we think about Walmart and who we are in the world, we often want to sort of frame the conversation in we support this community and we have X number of associates that work for us. But really the value that Walmart brings is this giving you the stuff that you need and want at an affordable price. And so when I think about cultural connections, it's really framing up that value to the customer and then meeting them where they are. And I can talk a little bit about that later and some of the stuff we've done for both the Hispanic and African American community.
Well, I think when your values as a company and what you sell align, then it just comes through with the way that you connect with your customers. And I will, since I'm now in a podcast, but I have been in brands and talk about my experience in previous brands. I don't know if you guys remember, but I think 8 years ago there was a big rebrand of Bonobos. And Bonobos used to be a brand that was really kind of broy or preppy. It went between if you go to Nantucket and the Hamptons you wear it, or if you're in Wall Street you wear it. But really the DNA of the brand was about inclusivity because the clothes fit better. The pants fit better than any other pants. So it was at the moment when we realized that if the pants are about inclusivity and everybody finding their feet in their clothes, if we could make the brand about everybody finding their feet in the world, then the product and the marketing would be in alignment and we would be able to talk much more comfortably and authentically to the customers. And I think that was like a big unlock for the brand, and it doesn't always happen, but when you can make it work, it's a flag.
I would say it's a value exchange within the context of the audience you're trying to connect with.
So I'll add authentic engagement, and it's interesting because I think we've all, if you've been in this industry any length of time, and certainly even in the last 5 years, we're bombarded with those two words and those two words together, especially when we're talking about the Hispanic market. Authentic engagement, is it a piece of creative? Is it something being added to a piece of creative? Is it, being on the ground with communities? But if the question is, what does that really mean to me? The way I think about it in my work is how we measure authentic engagement, right? Because you can put together what you think is authentic, but measuring the impact, whether it's a sales lift, whether it's brand awareness, whether it's something in that realm. That's how we're going to understand whether or not our engagement was authentic, because we know authenticity is going to drive movement, right? And so the best comments I have about this is certainly work with the right teams and the right people to help you build something authentic. And you all know that that's not a newsflash, but measuring the results of that campaign or that creative or that outreach will help you understand whether or not you hit that authenticity button, because it's not going to move if it isn't.
Stacie, let's stick with you and on the measurement piece. So that's on the back end of the campaign, right? Measuring what you saw from it, what the results are. What about on the front end, where you're trying to come up with what you're going to do, trying to justify spend? How can marketers use data and insights to build better campaigns to reach this elusive, authentic engagement?
Well, I think one of the things that is really needs to be broken and rebuilt is when I say the way we think about the U.S. Hispanic community specifically, is we all throw around some of the data. Certainly this month, Latinos are younger, Latinos are more digitally engaged, Latinos are this or that. But yet so we engage differently with this community, but we still somewhat do it with the foundation of the blueprints of what we've always done or what we're doing with other communities. And so it is, yes, it's new and exciting and it's different and it's considering all the evolution of this community. But it's kind of like, and I'm not a car person, so if you're a car person in here, I know you're going to get this reference. My dad is. It's like building a new car on the same frame of like an old car, or using the same engine. Like I'll hear my dad say, "Oh, that's still a blah 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 engine." It's like a new car but of the same engine. So I think that's one of the fundamental things we need to change. But it requires breaking what we've done. We've talked about in this month, certainly, the median age for Latinos, the median age for non-Hispanic, white, all of that. But if you consider that, and that the bulk of the community is younger, on the younger side, right, under 30, then that's going to influence how the older community receives and engages with products too, which means that older demographic isn't going to, you can't use blueprints from non-Hispanic white and sort of apply them assuming that, but that demographic is the same. It's the younger demo that behaves differently. Everyone behaves differently because you're lopsided. So I think to answer your question is you need to break it and kind of rebuild it, and I know that's hard. And we all don't really want to do that, but I think we need to.
Yeah, and sticking with some of the hard stuff, unfortunately, as we get started. We'll get to the successes and the wins too, but Cynthia, what are some of those common pitfalls beyond what Stacie's mentioned already on how brands try to engage?
I mean, at least with Latinos, we see a lot of companies just literally translating a campaign. Just if there's food in the table, take the burger, put the tacos, and then just the same story. Without thinking, well, maybe Latinos eat differently. Maybe we don't have a schedule when we don't have to leave at 2. You have to have more people on the table. So I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls, that people think that you can just do that or translate it to Spanish. Like Latinos don't necessarily speak Spanish. The second generation don't speak Spanish, and it is of course harder to understand a segment that is not monolithic, but it's also much more fun to try to have something that is nuanced, not just like, let's just do this in Spanish with tacos.
Although tacos never hurt, right? Tacos are a win too. But okay, so let's stick with you, Cynthia. And what are some ways that brands can move beyond that? What are some ways that they can build content that resonates?
I mean, it's always, I think, easier if your team looks like your customer base, because then it's going to come natural when you're creating a piece of content or you're looking for a media, you put together a media plan. The team is being able to just like the lens through which you do things, because we're all biased, and if you have people that understand the consumers firsthand, it's going to be easier. And the second one, lucky, we're all very lucky, at least as Latinos, that now the content that was historically made for Latinos is being consumed by the general population. I was telling Stacie that I just got an email, like an invitation to the party, the closing party of Ad Week next week, and in the title it says Latino music will be featured. So being Latino, like content for Latinos is what the masses are consuming. Now another pitfall is how we represent those Latinos, because unfortunately we're still representing Latinos through stereotypes, right? Like who is the Latino actor or the actress? we're gonna put them to be like the drug dealer or like somebody that's not educated, and that's not who we are. Like we're all Latinos. Nobody here that I'm aware of is a drug dealer, so we need to be represented the way that we. This is what we can say when you work for a big company.
Actually, the only thing I would add to that, is like specifically, like what can you do specifically? I think that, and again, when I talk about breaking in, thinking upper funnel. So right now, we are also performance-based, and I know why we are. Performance-based is what we're all doing, and we all understand the environment we're in. But for Latinos who tend to be, again, younger, what's missing is some of that upper funnel, like brand awareness, the things that we all grew up with and we're familiar with, and things we recognize, right? Well, we're not activating in that same way. So if I know that's oversimplified, but if you're asking what can we do, I would say a little more upper funnel for Latinos, and of course we still need performance-based marketing, but that would be one suggestion.
Stacie, could you also share some insights that you've seen from your recent Latinos in Sports reports, which everyone should read the complete reports. They're filled with so many insights, but I think there are a lot that really tie into that upper funnel.
Okay, I'll leave one only because I feel like I've been over chatting my stay here. We did just do a report on Latinos in sport, and so one of the most fascinating findings, I guess, is even if you're not working directly in sports or with teams and leagues, was how much Latino culture is influencing mainstream. And again, this is something we've said for a long time. We talk about Bad Bunny and music, but really specifically a cool example, yes, there we go, raise the roof. Okay. One cool example was Copa America. So if you are Latino or not, you probably knew this past July, there were two major tournaments on the same day, July 14th. There was the UEFA European Championship between with Spain and England, right? And then there was Copa America, which was Brazil and Argentina. And even if you didn't care that much, you heard about it. And ironically, this year was Copa America was the highest watched tournament ever in the United States. But more interesting than that was the fact that just under 50% of the audience was non-Hispanic white, and that's up from 23%. So that tells me, even if you're not, thinking oh, maybe this is somewhere I should be, if you think about it just as a marketer, this somewhat niche part, I apologize to Stephen for saying this, somewhat niche like Latino sport, right? And I'm sorry again, but I'm thinking about US sports culture, right? Copa became a must-see event for everyone. And there were people in my office who were definitely not Latino, who were talking about the barbecues that they were going to have, or getting together to watch Copa America. And I thought that was fascinating to see in data how influential Latino culture has been on what is a must-see or must-do event in the U.S.
Absolutely, and I think that blend back and forth is part of what we've heard all morning, all day, where it's just good marketing because it does make sense of these things that you can connect with. So, Anna, let's continue on some of the ways that brands can succeed at this. And Walmart, certainly a mainstream brand, but you have had some really successful campaigns recently and things that have gone beyond that performative, small scale things.
So, absolutely. I think when we talk about people-centered conversations and brand building and awareness, that's something that I certainly focus on at Walmart. And when I think about people-centered conversations, why should people believe us? The reasons to believe really does come down to what is the business doing? How are we working together? And so often when we're marketers, we're doing a lot of storytelling. And what I recognize when we really want to be authentic and we really want to make that connection is we have to create some story doing moments. And so what we've done recently, for example, is we've launched a couple of areas of conversation that is really centered around these digitally powerful, deeply influential, young, diverse Gen Zers. And when I say that, I mean they run TikTok, right? And so what the conversation is about the intersection of their identity and interests and how we as Walmart, not Walmart marketing, are delivering for that customer. So the example, and I'm actually working with Javier on this, is that, we, for Hispanic Heritage Fund specifically, we have just launched the Evolution Project. Go shop that collection right now. It is creators that are remixing their own traditions from the insights that we all know. And they are creating new assortment, actually, for Walmart. They're capsule collections. One of them, as an example, is Roberto Lugo, who is a potter that you can see his art at the Met. And now he has a story to tell about his own upbringing as a Puerto Rican man in Philly, and how he can bring accessible products and artwork to everybody. And not just to the Hispanic community, to everybody. And we really want to see that kind of conversation over and over again, and that's how we start to brand build, but we bring along the performance conversations. So we are tracking the sell-through of all his assortment, but it still resonates at the highest level of, is Walmart there? Is Walmart for my community? And we're trying to bridge the gap between commerce and culture.
Excellent, and that was Wave Evolution, and I've already shopped it. There's a pigeon print dress that I'm sure is going to sell out, because if you hear pigeon print, it doesn't sound like something you want, just visit it. It's beautiful.
We also have another shout out. The other brand that we're featuring is Wish Me Luck. They're a cult LA brand. They're super cool, and one of the guys who is the founder, his TikTok is going viral right now, and I'm trying to not sell out online because people are like super interested. When you have 400,000 organic views, like that's it. Like people are gonna click. They're gonna click because they're inspired and they feel proud to support.
So Javier, I know she mentioned that you were working on that campaign. I assume you were part of that viral moment, and that was a big part of the plan.
I come in and give perspective versus actually the activation side of it, and I've been very blessed as an advisor to folks like Walmart, NFL, Amazon Music, Lionsgate Studios, to have a conversation. And I don't start with the conversation of taco versus burger or Spanish versus English, because I think Gen Z and Gen A are way beyond that. And I think the people that I talk to, we talk about authentic conversation in a very different way. We talk about how do we get into creator culture. That's where we got to start, because that is where young people kind of focus. Even the conversation that you're mentioning about Copa America, yeah, that's a great statistic, but I think that is happening not because Spanish is cool, it's because young people are in a global mindset, and they care about Brazil and Neymar and Argentina and Messi versus, it's Copa America. So I think the conversation we should be having is more about what are the communities that we want to build on, and they may be driven by ethnic perspective, but we can't start there. And that's the conversation we're having with Walmart, right? Like, let's not focus on it. They happen to be Latino, but what they're doing great for their community is the important conversation. And then you can figure that out by looking at social media. People need to take the effort of understanding what the community conversations are on Reddit, on TikTok, on Snapchat. And as a marketer, we have to get into that exercise. If you talk to anybody under 25, as a professor I talk to them, they're doing research for me. They're like, this is what Reddit is telling you. As opposed to us looking at stats, and not to say insights are important, but insights, but that plus that type of understanding of community building is where young people are at, and as marketers, we have to combine the art and science of that, and then create culture around that. And you don't have to be Latino to understand. The kid that does all my Latino marketing, he's a white boy from Chicago that just understands how to tap into culture creating. So I was having that conversation with him about Bad Bunny before we put Bad Bunny on the stage of Super Bowl, and it became a thing. You know what I'm saying? So we have to get into that mindset as authentic engagement strategists, as opposed to culture expanding strategists.
Can I say something else just about Reddit? Because I think, like marketers, somehow we think that by listening on even TikTok or Instagram, or like doing a survey, we understand what's going on. And at least at Monilayo, the last company where I was chief marketing officer, We actually created a Reddit-like forum in the app because we knew that our most loyal customers were having conversations in Reddit about us, about financial inclusion, financial products, how many Reddits are there about investing, crypto. So we thought if instead of having the conversation happening outside, we can have it in our app, we can be using our own AI to monitor the conversation and then take it to our marketing campaigns and things like that. So I think Reddit should be like a daily visit for every marketer.
It's wonderful. I love that way that you were able to get the insights by shifting it into your platform as well. And let's talk more about that measurement piece, because I think there are some things where we all know how to measure them. It's very straightforward, but again, something like authentic engagement that is subjective, is easily defined. What are some ways that you can measure the success and prove it out so you can make that a long-term investment for your company?
Oh, you want me to answer that? There's a number of ways, obviously, we can look at. I mentioned earlier brand lift, I mentioned sales lift, I mentioned, of course, gross impressions. There's all the ways you can measure that. But I actually want to circle back to what you were saying, Javier, because it's so important. You were talking about really building plans based on sort of affinities, like affinity group versus culture, and I love that because we too are looking at ways we can support clients in this endeavor. When I talked about COPA as an example, the idea, as you stated so well, isn't really about Hispanics watching COPA. It was about the momentum from this one community that was absorbed by other communities that are outside of that community. I talked about non-Hispanic white, but that's exactly it, right? Like how are we, there's simple ways to measure that engagement or those touch points, which I gave you most watched ever, right? But there are a lot of more nuanced ways where we can better understand sentiment. I'm sure you're all working with folks that look at your creative more closely. And one of the cool things I recently did with Annie Aim and Carlos Santiago from Santiago Solutions Group was we wanted to look not just, of course, at the lift that we see with inclusive brand creative within content, but when you have inclusive brand creative in inclusive content, whether or not you get a 2 or a 3x. So thinking again around the environments in which you're placing your inclusive creative, and how you can sort of better leverage that. There's a lot of work being done around contextual advertising. I'm sure you're all aware of that. That can help you better figure out where exactly you're going when you're doing some of that lower funnel.
So can I jump in there? So if you look, going to add to that, if you look at, so this is kind of actual practical implications of how you should be planning. If you think about demographics, it's about building what your product is going to be. Psychographics is really about the positioning and the messaging side of it. And then the idea of affinity groups, what I call it is culture graphics or cultural mapping, where you're clustering affinities around certain populations or certain mindsets that allow you to deepen your engagement. So it goes down to the bottom funnel, but that should be reinforcing what your product and your psychographic sets will be to what's going on with Walmart, right? So then their understanding that conversations on the affinity groups goes back into what their product should look like, then figures out the strategy. So it's not the way we used to plan, it's actually a circular moment, but affinities and cultural understanding and listening helps kind of really drive a different type of marketing planning that's not seasonal or yearly the way corporations do it, but it's a constant cycle. And young people do this constantly. We're just not used to it because we talk in these terms. That's all I can say.
Sure. Yeah,
I can say yes to all of that, and being the brand side marketer, this is hard. Partly because some of our plans have non-traditional activities, right? So how do you measure the value of somebody going, okay, Walmart, in a sort of a TikTok that's going viral, right? So you look at all the proxies, you look at engagement rate, you look at interaction rates. There's that. And I think there's a framing of the opportunity around how we measure. Just by the way, this is the stuff that we're doing right now. Nothing is solved. Everyone's on a journey. And truly the value of earned. Like, truly, how do I get top value from Women's Wear Daily and Bella Mag and, I don't know, Complex, just like wrote about us the other day. That's cool. We're not in Complex, traditionally. So like the framing of that opportunity is not just quantifying impressions, it's really about getting, one of our objectives is putting Walmart into culture and culture into Walmart. That's like one of those measures. Like now the quantifying of it, the creating like the solid value that I can bring to leaders, that's the hard part, just to be very frank. But really having a good understanding of all of the non-traditional activities and how that's really kind of creating heat is some of the things that we're currently working on. And we still need to sort of figure out as part of the journey.
And that is kind of the work that we're doing, is how to figure out what that heat is,
Yeah.
and measuring heat. And then one added piece to that whole puzzle what's starting to happen is that we're feeling the pressure and we're having these conversations with marketers. The next phase of that needs to break is our media companies that traditionally market to, these ethnic-centric kind of places, because that's not how people buy, you know what I'm saying? That's not how people consume media. So we have to break the way we even talk to our media partners and actually have them think about us versus us trying to fall into a demographic 18 to 34 Spanish-speaking community. That doesn't exist anymore. At least for our marketers. I know there's an aggregate and there's a cost savings in doing that, but we have to rethink that. That's why we're saying it's digital.
Absolutely, and I feel like that culture into Walmart and Walmart into culture is such an excellent distillation of everything that's been talked about today. Well, I know we're coming up on time, but I think we'd love to leave everyone with how they can prepare for the future. What kinds of emerging trends and opportunities are we seeing? What should brands be doing to stay relevant and impactful? Well, we can start wherever, and I'll call on each of you.
Before we know it, 1 in every 3 Americans is going to be Latino. The way that we say it with my organization is like, you're going to be hearing, hello, hello, hola. That's insane. So if that's one trend, and the other one is that many Latinos don't speak Spanish and you won't be able to reach them with Spanish media, it's going to be impossible to reach them by giving your media partner the target that you were saying. 5 million Latinos. Latinos are consuming all media, and everybody's consuming Latino content. So all I can say is make content that's going to be relevant to Latinos, but it's also going to be relevant to non-Latinos, and then you kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
I'll add that we are moving, if we haven't already, I think for the most part, from one-to-many to one-to-one. So that's going to require all of us, and I oversimplified it earlier when I talked about sort of breaking the system and rebuilding it. It helped me think so much more clearly about it when I was talking about the old demographic ways and rethinking how we're doing that. I would say that's probably the most important trend that we all need to focus on, is how we're going to refine that message delivery and make it meaningful with, in many cases, fewer resources, more options, and with everything now around programmatic and performance-based, there's a lot of work there to be done. Specifically around the Latino community, I would say we need to add this layer of affinity and affinity on top of the work that we do, so we can further refine these targets and better understand that it's not just Latinos, as Javier so eloquently suggested, that it's really more around, who of us doesn't know, if you think about hip-hop culture or some other culture, it's really defined by a very broad and diverse youth. And as we are going through this, it's not even a demographic evolution, it's a demographic revolution in the United States. It's going to require, again, sort of breaking and rethinking it. So that one-to-one and rethinking around affinity and culture groups versus a specific race and ethnicity.
That's a hard one. I would just say, I'm going to keep it real high level. Be an active learner. Be around a lot of young people that mentor you. And don't stay within the context of before, stay in the context of now. Perfect example, think about dating in the 2000s, think about dating now. Very different conversation.
To that point, well, not to that point. relevance is fleeting and ever changing. Have a tiered strategy of big bets, so like this Revolution project and all the projects that we've done with the business, 12 to 18 month timeline. Then there's the marketing component of it, which is probably your 6 month timeline. Then there's the opportunistic, like, who is the next piece of Pluma? You should all probably listen to this guy named Javier, apparently. I learned that from a young person.
Javi's dope.
And so, like, and what are the ways that, like, if he goes into a Walmart, what are the ways that we can capture and catapult that kind of momentum? And so, really having a tiered planning strategy where you can really try to consistently be relevant in many places and spaces, both for me, the store, and then online, is something like we're trying to do as marketers within the Walmart walls.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. This has been so insightful and really appreciate your time and everyone's attention here today.